Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the White Coat Club. My name is Lindsay, and I am a counselor here at Moon Prep. And today we're going to be talking about a topic we have talked about before, which is writing the personal statement. But today I'm bringing in a fresh perspective with one of our counselors, Amanda, who you'll hear a little bit more from in a second. But before we kind of dive into this topic, don't forget to like and subscribe to get more BSMD and college admissions advice. All right. Amanda, we're so glad to have you here. Do you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda. I am in Florida right now, and I am a counselor here at Moon Prep. I was originally hired as an essay coach, but now I'm doing the whole counselor role. I went to undergrad at UT Austin and then went to Penn for my master's in higher education and really got a broad scope of admissions and how college admissions is changing. So, seen it all, read a lot, and I'm really happy to be here.
Yay. So I think that you'll be have some really good perspectives on the personal statement, which is going to be what we're going to be talking a ton about because I feel like every year of college admissions, this is really like the first hurdle we have to get through in order to be successful in this process. So the personal statement, for those who don't know, is going to be 650 words. It goes to nearly every school on your list. There are some exceptions like the UCs or like other maybe state schools that don't require it for whatever reason. And it is a little stressful for students to pick like the right topic, I think. Now, Amanda, when you're kind of working with students, how do you decide like what prompt to use?
I actually tell my students to not really look at the prompts just yet. Start thinking of topics, think of ways that you can think about getting to 650 words and let yourself write. And then we can see the question after that. I really want students to just share what they want to share. Don't look at the topics yet, don't look at the questions yet. Just write, and the question will find its way.
I have a similar philosophy. It's like the Pirate's Code, where it's more of like general guidelines rather than like a hard and fast rule. And, we maybe want them to use it as inspiration, but I don't want them to like have one topic in mind and like be writing just to that because I think it does kind of stifle that creativity. So write first and then you can decide the prompt. I meant to look this up beforehand, but I didn't. But I did read a stat, that the Common App said that I think it's like 25% or so of students do pick prompt number 7, which is like choose a topic of your choice. And so colleges aren't going to like look down on you for picking that topic. If
Right.
even if it is like the more commonly picked one, you do not get bonus points for picking like a weird one. Like I don't
Yeah.
think I've had kids talk too much about like a challenge a belief like
Mhm.
that topic prompt. I not many kids do that one, but you can pick whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely think if one of the questions is 1 through 6, we will absolutely find a way to make sure that it aligns with that. But yes, number 7, the last one, it's totally fine to go off of that one.
How do you typically brainstorm with your students?
So typically, I like to just give random questions. I just start asking questions about anything at all. Usually, I like to have students just write down 10 topics, 10 things that they like, maybe 10 experiences, and just kind of go from there, like not limiting yourself with topics. Like, I absolutely have to talk about my dog. Like, you don't have to talk about your dog. You can just expand more into that, but definitely just making lists and bullet points of just about anything.
Yeah.
Yes. What about you?
I was pretty similar because I feel like it is a little bit of almost in some ways like a therapy session because we're like, okay, let's
Mhm.
get to like who you are as a person
Yeah.
in some ways. Like, let's understand like what kind of qualities you like to do. So I know like Abby, one of our other like counselors here at Moon Prep likes to do what's it called? Like the word map, where things will be
Yes.
like jutting
Like
off
the
word
brain.
map.
Yes.
And those like things that will jut off will be like the different qualities you want to showcase, or maybe the different extracurriculars you want to showcase, or things like that. And so you can really be doing any brainstorming technique that works best for you. But I am a pepper you with questions type person, and not not everything has to be addressed like that day in the call either. Like I want the kid to like have some moments to think about things too, and talk to their parents, talk to friends, do that kind of thing because sometimes it's hard to talk about yourself
Yeah.
and, other people's insights sometimes can be super helpful as well. How about any topics to avoid?
As much as I love hearing these stories, I definitely think that sports might be one to avoid. Just because, yes, sports are great. They make you resilient. You spend a lot of time with sports, but that's kind of what the activities list is for. You can talk a little bit more about that. But with sports, there's always going to be, a winner, a loser. Sometimes we get injured. That's just the nature of sports. We love that you love sports. But maybe avoiding that kind of topic will help it not be as generic per se. Yeah, so what about you? What are some topics?
Agree. And I always tell kids too, I'm like, I have exceptions to like every single like topic where I'm like, don't do this. But, I have had like three kids who do it really great. And so always talk to us first if like you think that that topic is going to be the right one for you. And I think especially like if you do have like a unique perspective on it. So
Mhm.
like, for example, if you do want to write about sports, but instead it's more about sports, like when you were working in like the Special Olympics, like as your little buddy and like you're talking about growth and like working with people that are different from you or whatever your kind of ideas. And of course you're not really just talking about sports, something like much bigger than that. It's different from like the other kid on your team who's maybe writing about soccer as well, so think about that too. One topic that I do like to avoid as well is kind of like feeling othered, just because I think kind of in a similar way as like honestly, like what teenager hasn't felt like they're an outsider in
Right.
some way at some point, like they might have moved or they might have just like, lost a friend group or like, gone through some struggles. And
Mhm.
unless they kind of have like, once again, a unique perspective on it that showcases why they're different or how it helped them be more resilient or something along that line,
Mhm.
or it's like really crucial to understanding them. Like I had one student who was like trans. And so of course, like that was like a huge focal point of his essay because that was a huge focal point of his like growing up and kind of discovering who he was. And so those types of things, could be what
Right.
you talk about, but we want it to ultimately serve the purpose of helping you kind of stand out to those college admissions officers too.
I think on the topic of reflection and growth and seeing how far you've come, talking about other people
Yeah.
can be okay, but not make that entire essay about somebody else. I think colleges really want to see your growth, see your perspective and experiences, and maybe just fully talking about one person doesn't really give them insight to who you are. So just being mindful if you are going to talk about somebody that inspired you, like what are those things that you now use from that
Mhm.
person? Just kind of being mindful about that too.
Yes, I feel like that's such a common one. Like they'll want to talk about like their grandparent or things like that.
Mhm.
You could totally talk about them, but it should be like 10% them,
Yeah.
80, 90% you,
Yeah.
and what they maybe inspired you to do. Like I had one student many years ago now, she talked about her grandmother and her grandmother was like really nurturing and kind of like instilled these qualities in her. And then she talked about how like kind of similar to what her grandma did, she did it for other people as
Yeah.
well. And so
Mhm.
it ended up being like a growth story and like a about her rather than her grandma.
Right.
And kind of on that vein too, kind of death of a family member, death of a grandparent, I think is really common to talk about and want to talk about because it could be like the first big traumatic event that happens to students. And it can be like really influential to their lives. But, it is hard, I think, sometimes to make it more about you and more about your growth rather than kind of about those feelings in the moment.
Mhm.
Now I have once again had kids who've done a really great job. One student I worked with like this year definitely did use it to kind of show how it like forced him into like other activities and pushed him out of his comfort zone. Um,
Mhm.
and so those are some ways that you could potentially use it to make it a little bit more impactful and more about you. And I think especially like after the pandemic, this has become like a topic people are more and more willing to talk about and kind of express. And maybe it is affecting kids at a higher rate too. But what's your take on like talking about mental health in the personal statement?
I definitely think there are pros, and I wouldn't say cons, but things to think about when we're talking about mental health. So I know we talked about earlier talking about someone else in a personal statement, unless it's something about your experience or your growth, really maybe avoiding talking about somebody else's struggles rather than maybe something that you went through or something like that. Unless you maybe, started an organization or you feel really passionate about a certain aspect of it. I think just being really careful when you're honoring someone else's experiences versus honoring your own and talking about it from your perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it in the fact that it is once again about you and you really want to be able to show impact. And if you did have like a really impactful experience with someone, even if it was their mental health, that you helped them get through something. And I have had students kind of have talk about this before, but it was almost like one little piece of their personal statement now that I'm thinking about it. And the fact that he kind of was talking about empathy and like how his friends always know that he's there for them and kind of gave a small little example about it. But like in the grand scheme of things, that was like maybe like 50 words, 100 and
Mhm.
100 words of his personal statement. So when
Mhm.
writing about mental health, I think this is definitely something you should get someone else to look at it too. You don't want the admissions officers to like almost like have a reason to reject you because I think that you're not like going to be able to like not survive at the place, but thrive really, I guess, at the place. That it's not going to be the best fit for you, the environment that they have. And so they are looking, of course, for a good fit of a student, but they also want to make sure the student wants to come here and like wants to come to their university and wants to like, be participating. And those are things that they're going to be looking at. And so, you know, you don't have to avoid talking about it. I've definitely had many kids this year talk about it. And maybe we put it actually in like the additional information section if we felt like it didn't belong in the personal statement,
Yeah.
like a small explanation of kind of things. And maybe it did impact grades or impact extracurriculars or things like that. Just kind of having that opportunity to talk about it can sometimes be like kind of cathartic towards students as well.
And sometimes it's kind of good to do a gut check when you start writing. If something kind of feels off or it feels, ooh, should I actually be writing about this? Maybe just doing a quick gut check and thinking, should I continue with this or should I maybe think about something else?
And maybe it ends up being like a supplemental essay too. It's always a good idea to kind of take a look at what other essays you might have to do right. You could be talking about it potentially even for BSMD, like in an interview if it's appropriate. So there's like other ways you can be talking about like these things that maybe aren't the right topic for a personal statement. Other ways you can get them in for like a
Yes.
smaller essay or something else. Do you have any like tips when you're writing the essay that students would be
Yes.
coming for?
For sure. So even though it does say 650 words, it's totally okay to have your first draft not be 650
Yeah.
words. It is totally okay in the first to just go over because maybe you're talking about an experience and something else comes up. Oh, or I learned about this, or this quality. I actually want to talk about that. Just start writing and we will clean it up. We promise. Just write what you feel. Obviously, maybe not going to like thousands of words,
Yeah.
maybe going a few hundred over just so we can see what really will stand out in the personal statement, but it's okay to go over. It's totally fine. Yeah.
I tell kids that exact same thing because I have like so many dumb analogies too. I always compare like essay writing almost to like a bush or like a shrub or something. And if you know how like people will like be shaping the bush and shrubs into like, interesting shapes.
Yeah.
If you give me a tiny little bush, I really can't shape it into something that interesting because I only have like a little bit to work with. But if you give me like five details or like five really cool stories, and it's like, okay, now we can really work with this. We can pick which stories we like best. We can figure out which details work best. But if you just like stopped in the middle of a sentence at like 650 words or stop in the middle of a paragraph, no conclusion, because they're like, well, I got to 650 words.
Mm,
No, we're going to edit it. Like it's going to be fine. So don't
yeah.
stop at 650 words exactly. Keep going. Finish
Yeah.
your thoughts, finish your essay, and then we'll kind of cut from there. Now, what is if it's really short, like only 400 words?
I've had students who have been, I have 350 words, and I promise you, Amanda, I have nothing else to give. And 9 times out of 10, I will be going through sentences, and I'm like, tell me more about this. Or you kind of stopped with this. I'm actually curious. Just look at sentences that you're like, if I was an admissions officer, I would have like 100 more questions. This is
Mhm.
a silly one, and I don't know why this came to my head, but say like your cousin is jumping on a trampoline, and I'm like, well, did you go to Walmart to get the trampoline? Was the cousin okay? What was the cousin doing? Just looking at maybe like little loopholes or just ways to kind of expand on your thoughts. Like, obviously, don't go into 500 more words about the trampoline, but just maybe giving more context where you think it might be given. That's kind of my thoughts. What about you?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And maybe it's also like you can add another example that kind of makes sense or kind of builds on the qualities that you're trying to showcase or whatever it might be. Or like if you're just like, I have nothing else, maybe it's not the right topic.
Right.
Maybe it is like we have to reevaluate, we have to go back to the drawing board because and you feel like maybe you aren't showcasing them enough too. We
Mhm.
don't want to give fluff. I'd rather you have 400 words than 650 words of just like fluffy stuff. And
Yeah,
so, you still want to be strategic, but maybe it's not the right topic for you then at the end of the day.
for sure.
There's
Yeah.
always something you can add, I think.
Yes.
And something else I always tell kids too is like sometimes just like write to write, write without judging yourself. I think a lot of kids will read like these really beautiful essays online, and they'll be like, oh, well, my essay doesn't look anything like that. It's like, well, yeah, of course, you're writing the first draft of your essay and you are reading like a polished, like maybe you went through 15, 20 drafts, like maybe it was 3 months in the making and you've spent like 30, 40 minutes on it. So it's like, of
Yeah,
course, it's not the same quality.
right.
It is not going to be a polished draft on your first attempt. There's always going to be changes. And like, yeah, maybe you like the core of it, but there are always
Mhm.
going to be changes. So don't be hard on yourself. Now, the other thing that I think hopefully to help kids when they're brainstorming their personal statement, you should be doing your brainstorming or your personal statement honestly in the summer. So if you're listening to it right now and you haven't started, doesn't matter where we're at in the cycle, you probably should be starting it. I think May, June is always a good time to get started because May, sometimes I'm like, this is our brainstorming month. June is like writing time. And then refining and kind of doing it there. And of course, I have some kids who are accelerated, some kids who are slower. But I
Mhm.
always want it to be done kind of by August 1st, as well as like
Yeah.
some other supplemental essays, so we can be hitting the ground running on other things. But as kids are starting to write it, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes kids are kind of making?
The amount of conversations that I've had kids share, I'm really grateful that I went to YouTube because I watched this essay that got me into Harvard. Ooh. I'm totally cool with people getting inspiration. I mean, I love getting inspiration, even if it's for something like Pinterest. Like, yes, that bow is cute, but when we're thinking about college admissions, you really want to stand on your own 2 feet. Again, it is great to get inspiration, but I think admissions officers can read right through if it's something they read before. Yes, they read so many, but I can only imagine like, oh, I feel like I've kind of read this one before that kind of has the same structure as like something that I read last year. But just being mindful that it's your words, it's your story, and inspiration is great, but it all comes back to you.
Yeah, I completely agree there too, because I've definitely sent some kids like some samples before. And then whenever they send me back their thing, it's like, okay, you literally followed the exact same formula. And
Hmm.
sometimes it works, but sometimes it does feel a little like disingenuous because it doesn't ultimately like speak to their voice and like their creative style.
Yeah,
So yeah, use
yeah,
it as like, inspiration, but don't copy because it's you
right.
that's being accepted and you're a different person than whoever got accepted before.
Yes.
And I guess on that same vein, one pet peeve I do have is whenever someone is like, well, I had my friend who's a freshman at Harvard read the essay and, or like, my supplementals for Harvard or wherever, and they
Hmm.
say XYZ. This person has like honestly probably no clue why they got accepted to Harvard. It could be that they wrote really exceptional essays. It could be other reasons. We have no clue.
Hmm.
And sometimes I think they don't have great advice, to be honest. And so, they could, I think, give you general advice maybe about what the schools are looking for, but, take everything, including like our advice, with like a grain of salt. And I
Yes.
guess to kind of along that line as well is like, asking too many people for advice. Like there's definitely could be too many cooks in the kitchen where you could ask Amanda for advice, you could ask me for advice, you could ask Nicole for advice, and we could all give you different advice and no one's advice, hopefully no one's advice is bad, it could all be good. Just take the essay in three different directions.
Hmm.
And now you're like stuck about like trying to fulfill all of our like advice and like the essays getting ripped to shreds. And I've seen it destroy some like really beautiful essays because they asked too many people for advice. So just because someone has an opinion doesn't mean one, it's a good one, and two, you have to take it. Think about that as you edit your essay too.
Yeah, I would say on that vein, the only thing that you should never get advice from is ChatGPT.
Yes.
Don't do it. Delete it if you have to. I know that there was kind of a viral example of this very recently of a kid who was very successful, has like his own business and is doing great, but it was kind of noticed that there was ChatGPT language in it, and we know those words. I call them like chat words, not buzzwords, just chat words. But it's very obvious when something like the flow of it feels interesting, like the words kind of look weird. It does read. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I feel like everyone, like at Moon Prep, and honestly, in the comment section, we're all like, well, he clearly used ChatGPT for this. And he was fantastic. He founded like, I don't remember how much this like AI company was making, but it was like millions. And so he was great. And he got rejected from like 15 out of the 18 like top universities he
Hmm.
made. And I'm sure like, and I think he was suing because he was like, well, if I can't get accepted, like, who can? But
Right.
it's because he didn't showcase who he was. Like a machine was showcasing who he was, and it what didn't
Yeah.
do a good job. Like like it, I honestly just read like 2 or 3 lines of it that was published, and it was like, okay, that's just screaming AI. And if these are
Yeah.
the little tidbits that you chose to share,
Yeah.
what's the rest going to look like? So,
For sure.
um, yeah, don't use ChatGPT. It's always very, very obvious. And we will confront students who work with us about it. And sometimes they'll deny it. And sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I used it. And here's like why, because I was struggling. And it's like, well, we can brainstorm, like we can work with
Yeah.
you, we can help with transitions, we can help you with things. Like I'd rather you say, oh, I didn't write the essay than you turn in something that then I have to honestly waste the students' time on editing and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And like their time and money. I don't want to do that. And so
Right.
this is kind of, I think, an ethical thing.
Hmm.
You're going to be a doctor, you can't be
Yep.
taking shortcuts. So
Correct.
this is a shortcut.
Yes. Exactly.
I guess too, like that means write in your voice. Like if
Yes.
you're using ChatGPT, it's not going to write in your voice.
Yeah.
And so even like before ChatGPT, we did have kids who were mm, trying to be someone they're not, trying to be
Hmm.
who they thought colleges were looking for.
Hmm.
And so I had one girl who like would always use really big words in her essays. And it was very clear she mostly knew what the definitions were, but they didn't quite work a lot of the times.
Right.
And it made her, didn't really have the effect of making her look smarter. It
Right.
just made us like kind of be like, okay, we wish we could actually hear what you're actually wanting to say a little bit more.
Hmm.
But be who you are. I had one kid who, and this was back when Northwestern still had their BSMD program. He got into Northwestern's program, and his essay, if I were to show it to you, you'd be like, that's like he doesn't use any words that are probably more than like 2 or 3 syllables.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
not like any massive words.
Right.
It's not like any SAT words at all.
Right.
So his structure was wasn't that, I mean, it was kind of creative idea, but it wasn't like wildly creative. And
Hmm.
honestly, like the idea itself, I think, was pretty straightforward. And so you don't have to be a genius to get accepted to a really hard program or really hard school. I mean, I think you just should be who you are. If you're not creative, it's okay. If you are creative, great. Like showcase that there.
I so agree. I feel like whenever I read kind of like, I wouldn't say basic ones, it's like you can tell when somebody's really excited about talking about
Yeah.
something so basic versus something that's supposedly creative but just doesn't feel authentic. I feel like whenever I'm reading, I sometimes try to read it in a voice, even if I've never seen the student. I try to read like, is this for real? Are they really excited about talking about this
Yes.
or like ready to talk about it? But yeah, just kind of being mindful of how you're actually formatting your essays.
This is such an aside, but I always tell kids like that too for interviews is that I think that we want to be so professional and like, come across so well that that means that we become flat and you don't
Yeah,
showcase your personality, but they want happy kids. They want kids who are going to interact and be bubbly. And of course,
yeah,
like, just because you're not bubbly doesn't mean you won't get accepted. They also need
right.
introverts or thinkers or, people like that. And so they're accepting lots of types of students. So be who you are and showcase who it is. Be excited about stuff and
Yes.
showcase why they should also be excited about whatever it is you're talking about. Um, One of our counselors here at Moon Prep
Yeah.
is Michaela, and Michaela loves
Mhm.
an essay map with her students where she's kind of mapping out all the different types of essays a student will have to write. Like if it's an activity essay,
Mhm.
diversity essay, or why the school essay, and then start to kind of plan out where the topics are going to go. And so this can
Right.
kind of be done in some ways in conjunction with like your personal statement brainstorming, because you're like, okay, I love this idea of talking about whatever it is, but just
Mhm.
not here.
Right.
And so, then you can use it somewhere else. And so look at the full picture of everything, save yourself a little bit of time later on. And, if a school doesn't have a supplemental essay, then maybe then that means, okay, I know I should be talking about this really important activity I've done all, 4 years because I really want them to know about it. Anything else you can think about for like big mistakes?
Yeah, I think one that I've had students kind of have conversations over, there's sometimes a common theme when we're reading personal statements, and that can be around the umbrella term of trauma. I've
Mhm.
had students have told me, "Well, I don't have anything. I feel bad, but I don't have anything of that level to share." And I do want to say first and foremost, we absolutely honor that, and your experiences are your experiences, and we will hear you out and help you. But it's okay if something doesn't go to the nth degree around the umbrella term of
Mhm.
trauma. Again, we love to talk about different topics. Like just start writing things out, see what's clicking. And if it's nothing of that caliber, that's totally fine. That's kind of what I've seen. Have you seen anything like that or similar?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think trying to like make a mountain out of a molehill too. They're not judging you based on like the most traumatic thing. And honestly, same thing for like challenge essays.
Mhm.
Sometimes it'll be like, what was like the biggest challenge you've overcome? I feel like kids really start to sweat with that one. And I remember brainstorming with this one lady, and she was like trying,
Mm.
and she was trying to like weigh which one event was more traumatic and which one was
Mhm.
more challenging. It's like one, college admissions officers are not going to know your other non thing that you,
Yeah.
the other traumatic thing that you went through that you're not writing about. And
Right.
two, they're not like accepting based in order of who's gone through the most traumatic thing. It's all
Right.
about how you handled the traumatic event, how you
Mhm.
handled the obstacle, whatever it is, big or small,
Yeah.
and how you kind of grew from it. Can you think of any other mistakes? I don't think we missed any, right?
No, yeah, I think we covered them. Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
Okay. So I think the last thing we'll kind of talk about a little bit is maybe just one or two of our favorite essays that we've seen in the past year or so. One that I wanted to share was actually about the no-no topic, where it was about like the death of a family member. The story kind of starts where this like student, when he was growing up, like he had a really robust family life. Everyone was always at their house cooking in the kitchen, they were making like food always together, and everyone was working together. And his grandmother was kind of just like the head chef over everyone. Kind of this all happens kind of in the first paragraph, and at the end of the first paragraph, she does pass away, unfortunately. Where it kind of goes from there, the family unit does kind of fall apart. Some
Mhm.
of his family moves away, he kind of is lost. And where the story kind of goes from there, because we still had like, 500 words, this was all
Yeah.
just the first paragraph, is kind of talking about how, as a kid, he was the sous chef in the back, kind of like collecting the curry leaves or whatever he might be doing while his parents are chopping, and kind of about him evolving from that sous chef position to the head chef. So he kind of talks about how like he had to like once again find his community as well because his community fell apart. And so he talks about like some of the different activities he does. He's in yearbook and then becomes an editor and kind of starts to take that over.
Yeah.
He had a kind of a human rights organization, and so talking about that he started, and so finding his community and starting to like build a safe place for other people too, because
Mhm.
that was like really important and things like that. And so, we kind of took this moment, and it spurred a lot of growth, I think, for him. And so that's always the goal as we go through this essay. But it definitely did start with death of a family member,
Yeah.
and other people, but it became solely about him and kind of his growth from sous chef to the head chef.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I did a good job showcasing his qualities, and honestly showcase like two out of two or three of his like big activities as well. And so we didn't have to worry about getting it in everywhere too.
Yeah.
What's a favorite essay of yours from last year?
Yeah, one that I have is kind of like a trip, and sometimes when I hear about trips, I'm like, "Yay, I'm so glad you had a good time." One of my students came to me and was like, "Amanda, I have an insane trip I have to tell you about. What can I do with this?" And after hearing her trip, she actually did tell me like how she grew from this trip. It was maybe 2 weeks in Italy, and I've seen like everybody and their parents are going to Italy these days, so I was like, "Just tell me about it." Um, but she grew so much in those 2 weeks. And she was like, "Well, I got postcards for everybody, but it said, wish you were here. but I was by myself. And so she kind of did it in a way was the title was Wish You Were Here. She would share the experience and then share what she learned from it. And she learned that she does like to lean on her family. There's nothing wrong with wanting to create bonds with your families, like obviously from birth to now. There was one that was like season's greetings where it was just raining where she was at, and she just learned to just be present and kind of let life happen. Everything was more kind of like an interpersonal quality or something that she truly learned about herself in such a short amount of time. And she was like, well, postcards are really little, and I was only there for a short amount of time, but they're so impactful. So that was one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's so cute. It's a good way to kind of showcase like little snippets and like
Yes.
little like lesson growths too, without
Yes.
it feeling forced or like too jumpy. So that's super
Yes.
clever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the beauty of personal statements. You can write about
Yes.
anything.
Exactly.
Any other things you want to add about writing the personal statement?
Honestly, my best advice is just to open a Google Doc and run. Just
Mhm.
go, and we will help you along the way. There's nothing too short of an idea. There's nothing like that's too extravagant that we can't find things to write about. Like, just write, and we will find it along the way.
I think that's a great point, and we will help students get to that idea. I love seeing the transformation of like where an idea starts and then where it actually ends up, because sometimes it does greatly evolve, and that's really the beauty of it, is we kind of figure out the shape. We might think that we're going for this, but then along the way actually discover that this is the best way. So be a little flexible, don't
Yes.
judge yourself, and yeah, start if you have it and you're applying in 2025, 2026.
Yes, for sure.
Cool. Well, I think that's it from us on writing the personal statement. If you do want help brainstorming, outlining, and editing your personal statement, contact us at moonprep.com. And you can schedule a free consultation call and we can tell you all about our services. But if not, make sure to like and subscribe to get some great BSMD and college admissions news. See you next time.